Hey, Mercy Hill, Pastor Bobby here. Got Pastor Andrew, and hey, we wanted just to spend some time because we know really everybody's kind of asking the question about, man, what is it going to look like for Mercy Hill to reopen our facilities? Do you guys have a timeline for that? Man, what's the online ministries that we're doing going to look like going into the future? So we would love to just spend some time, answering some of those questions, laying out a plan for you guys. But before we do that, I would love to just remind you guys of many of the things that have happened over the last couple of months, because I think it's real easy to think, and we've talked a lot about this, but it's real easy to think, man, the church has been closed, or when are we going to reopen Mercy Hill? And the reality is, first, us as pastors, man, we want to get back to the physical gatherings just as much as anybody. I mean, this is our life. I just think, man, the last 10 years, every single weekend, for me in vocational ministry is like being at church and being around the people of God. And so, man, we want to get back to gathering more than anybody. But, man, the church has not been closed. You know, the people of God is not a building, it's a movement. And we have seen God do so many incredible things over the last couple of months. I mean, honestly, for me, as sort of a staff member at Mercy Hill, getting to see so many of the things that God has done, I almost feel frustrated at times that that you guys don't get to see all of that, you know, and we've tried our hardest on the weekends to highlight things that are happening and life change stories, but man, so much stuff has gone on over the last couple of months. I think about, our kids ministry for the last couple of months. It just seems like almost every single weekend we hear a story of a kid that's come to Christ because their parents have been equipped to share Christ, and through our kids services being online. I think about our student ministry and kids that are going from the fringe to jumping into the ministry, and I think about the generosity of the church. I mean, this is sort of crazy with everything that's going on with the economy, but Mercy Hill as a church, we're ahead in terms of our budgeted income for the year. So many people that have onboarded to giving for the very first time this year, and man, that's just like so awesome. You think about No More Spectators. I mean, we are seeing, I wish we could highlight all the stories for you that we're seeing in No More Spectators. It's the day-to-day ministry that we've been doing with partner organizations, but also all the needs that have come up from COVID-19, and our church is being able to respond. I mean, you guys saw the story a number of weeks ago of people making masks and just all this different stuff that's a response to the needs that are happening in our community. I think about our community groups seeing record attendance over the last couple of months. And you guys know, as a church, it's like, man, our mission is to make disciples and multiply churches, and we've planted a church during this time, Redemption Church in Roanoke just over the last couple of weeks. Like, man, how awesome is that we get to still see our mission go about. So I just want to remind you guys that, man, the church has not been closed. God has been working among us, and probably even more than I can see, or even that Pastor Andrew could see. But, man, guys, we do want to get back together, gathering together physically. So, us as a leadership team, we're asking a number of different questions. The first is like, man, what is it going to look like to effectively use our facilities again? That's one of the biggest questions we've asked is like, man, we're seeing incredible ministry happening online. We're seeing incredible ministry happening in people's homes. Like, what is it going to look like to use our buildings again as an effective tool? Another question we've been asking is like, man, what is the online ministry of the church going to look like going forward? Obviously, we've seen a lot of really awesome stuff as a result of COVID and as a result of putting our ministries online. Another question we've been asking is like, what does it look like to rephase in our physical gatherings? And so I'm just kind of bringing you guys into the discussion that we've been having, to the discussion our leadership team has been having. And so we want to, you guys know, like, man, we want to continue our mission, making disciples, multiplying churches. The question is, like, man, what's the best, most effective way to do that and to be faithful to our mission during this time? So I'd love to turn it over here just in a sec to Pastor Andrew. I know a lot of people may be thinking, hey, as we're thinking about reopening our facilities, maybe what it's going to look like is, we're going to decrease what we're doing online and increase what we're doing physically together on the weekends. And I think that is sort of a natural maybe way to think about it, but that's not really how we're thinking about it. So I'd love for Pastor Andrew here to share with you guys how we're thinking about it over the next couple months and our online ministry of the church. So take it away, Pastor.
Yeah,
Andrew.
I think, man, I think it's important for us to just kind of dive into the waters that many churches around the country are dealing with right now, which is, what does ministry online look like going forward? I know that everybody watching this really just wants to know the date of when we're opening the buildings, okay?
But we're going to make you sit here for about another 15 minutes.
I'm going to just go ahead and make them kind of drink the vision before we... but no, guys, I want y'all to know that, man, we are not, and other leaders around the country that God has equipped to lead, I think, man, the church in our nation, honestly, I mean, they're not thinking, and nor are we, that we're sort of like right now, because we're about to start thinking about opening the buildings, coming to the end of a blip. It's more like, man, we are on the very, very beginning stages of a new paradigm, that God has done something, he has shaken up. And man, there's no going back. This is the new normal, nor do we want to go back, because we feel like wholeheartedly that we have an opportunity now, yes, to move forward with the reopening of our buildings and getting all of that stuff kind of back to the way it was running, hopefully maybe with more people because of people that we've kind of caught online, during this time. But also having this other whole arm of the church that is specifically geared towards helping new people engage and helping our people, you guys, people that would want to watch this, stay more engaged in a fast-paced world where there's the reality is, man, that people aren't at church 52 weekends of the year. So I think for us, man, we really want to think about launching Mercy Hill Online for the sake of making disciples and multiplying churches. Man, kind of what we're doing now, but in an incredibly beefed up way going forward. I think that some of the reasons that we would give for this, and I'll get into some of the objections. I know that immediately people think about church online, they have an immediate, and I get that because I've had some of that as well. But let's just talk about it a little bit, all right? So the first thing is, why do we want to do this right now? I mean, over the next 6, 12, 18 months. Certainly there are going to be folks, based off our survey, that want to come back to the buildings but don't feel like that's the smartest thing for them to do for whatever is going on, for underlying conditions, man, for just fear of whatever it is. And that's people's decision to make. And so for one thing, man, we want people that are already a part of Mercy Hill in the little short term, the 6 to, however many months it is down the road, to feel like they can engage fully and not just get a podcast of a sermon, but really be a part of what is going on. But that's not the big question, because the big question is like, okay, that's still kind of part of COVID. Like what happens in the future? That's where we really get into the two things that are, man, this is a way for us to catch more people online, and this is a way for us to continue to make disciples better for people that we have, because people are already, they have a better experience and can stay kind of in the know and more connected when they're gone. Let's start there, okay? So just a better way to connect people. Y'all, we live in a world that we have already as a church tried to adapt to. Thursday night services. Man, we do Thursday night, all day Sunday night. Like, man, we are trying hard already to make a lot of room for people to engage. But the fact is, in a fast-paced world, travel, sports, man, people going to the beach, summertime stuff, whatever it is, people like, some that might be watching this are extremely connected. This is their church home. Man, you guys are pouring out yourself for the sake of the ministry. You're involved in generosity, all of that. But there could be, we pull the numbers sometimes with our kids ministry. I mean, you could see, like, man, people, the average family may miss, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, even Sundays in a year. I obviously push people like, hey, man, come back from vacation early. But the reality is, however you fall on that spectrum, we believe that the full online ministry where, for example, we missed that Sunday, but we understand that not only does that mean we get to go back and catch up on the sermon, but it's like, no, man, our family is going to come together with our kids at the little beach house or whatever, and we're going to worship God together, and we're going to reflect through song and sing together. And man, our kids are going to do the kids ministry program right there. I mean, for my family, this is just a huge blessing for any time that we are going to miss. And I know that's going to be true for many of you as well. So it's going to help kind of stick people to the church.
That's sort of been, I don't know, this is how I feel. That's sort of been an unexpected blessing of all this, to hear these stories of families that, maybe just weren't really sure what to do before with their kids and discipleship, and to see now, like, man, them taking in the services and doing it together. I think that's been sort of a really cool thing we've seen.
I think that when you move all the stuff online, there's an immediate push, and I get it because I've thought about it, which is, man, people are going to start staying home. But what we have seen consistently from churches that were doing this, I mean, literally a decade before COVID, okay? I mean, there are churches around the country that are so far ahead, I mean, with different things like this, that, man, they will tell you in a heartbeat, this leads to more connectivity, not less, greater involvement, not less. Because what happens is, man, when people miss, they don't just miss a week. It's like, man, they have the opportunity to kind of stay connected and that kind of thing. Hey, the second thing I would say, or, of those two of like, man, helping people stay connected. The other part of this, y'all, is just a straight up evangelistic mission of the church. Man, we are called to make disciples and to multiply churches. And part of that means that we go to where people are. Man, I think this is already a trend. Karen Newhoff says it like this. COVID did not change anything. It accelerated everything. Okay, so the world was already moving more toward people checking your stuff online and hovering around your church on the internet and listening to a whole sermon series before they ever came. They were already kind of doing that. After COVID, that is going to be, I think, the total norm. Okay, so we want to put the best product we can that is designed for people to be able to engage at home, for their kids to engage at home, maybe even start the process of nibbling around the edges of community groups or stuff with their student ministry and all of that online. And then that's going to, again, as we've seen and we've talked to other churches, going to lead to more connectivity, not less. They're going to eventually jump in. The goal is not to keep anybody online. The goal is to catch people online. And so I think we're going to have the opportunity to see that. The other thing is, and then I'll get into maybe more of what it looks like. Y'all, the other thing is that, I think that, a church like Mercy Hill is very much built on come and see evangelism. Now, we push our people. We need to share the gospel. The gospel is not, the gospel is words. Like, we need to tell people the gospel. I get that. But just the fact of it is, a lot of our ministry is built on come and see, where people say, man, I'm an introvert. I love my family. I love my coworkers. Man, I would love to just tell them, hey, this helps me. I would love for you to come with me. And that's fine. That's great, right? But a lot of what has happened during COVID is that people who were naturally come and see oriented have become watch and talk oriented, meaning share the sermon. That's why we've seen so many more sermon views and so many more views of our stuff. It's not like the church not like the church building's closed. So then we saw about the same number of views on the weekends. It's like, man, the church building's closed, and then the views kind of went up because people started realizing, hey, man, I can share, especially around Easter. I can share this, and then my friends can talk about it. And so I think those are two great strengths, catching people online evangelistically and helping people stay connected when they do miss here. I think, the natural question, I think, too, is a little bit of like, man, well, what does that look like then? And the way I think about it is, I think we ought to think about it like all the ministries that a campus would do, yet not the exclusivity of a campus. Meaning, man, we want to put forth all the ministries that a campus would have generally online. But, man, they're not designed for an online group of people that solely, exclusively only do online content. So that's where we get the idea of like, man, you might be a High Point or Clifton Road person, but you go out of town, it's like, man, this online experience is for you. So I don't think we're going to call it a campus. I think it's going to be an online experience that is fully immersive. I'm talking about being able to jump into a group, being able to jump into kids ministry, being able to do the stuff on the weekend. And man, again, just trusting that, yeah, man, could there be some people that sort of end up having a little bit of less connection? I'm not saying there can't be that at all. By and large, the history of these things is that it's not. Now, I know that some of you guys from Hebrews are going to say, but is this forsaken the assembling of yourselves together? Okay, and I have three answers to that. Number one, for an unbeliever, there is absolutely there is no call for them to assemble. So if we can do something better online that helps them get caught, and get bit with the bug of what God is doing here at Mercy Hill, then I am all for that. All right, the second group is the people, like I said, that are going out of town. Or, for example, maybe work takes you somewhere for a couple of months, but you're not going to be there forever, and you want to jump into an online group so you can stay connected. It's more connectivity, not less. In that category, I would actually put, man, there's people here at Mercy Hill that call Mercy Hill home. They love Mercy Hill. Their kids come. They come on the weekend. But they have maybe a tough time doing community group right now. And I know that can get dicey because you say, well, when we make time for what we have priorities for. Well, that's fine and all. But I will tell you this, like my wife did an online Zoom group. There's a couple of single moms in that group. That's a tough thing to navigate, with kids and going to bed and getting out of the house and babysitters and all that stuff. Man, they jumped on an online group. I know for many of us, like me going from an in-person group to a Zoom group felt like a step back in biblical community. But for some that were not in biblical community, this is a step forward in terms of getting nearer to what God has for them.
Yeah, I've heard of stories of people that were in groups prior to COVID, but they traveled just constantly for work, like during the whole week. And so like they actually never got to go to their
Right.
group, even though they were in a group. And now they're saying like, man, with an online group, I'm like at group every single week, whereas before I could never go to a group.
Right.
So I could see people like that continuing to take advantage.
Yeah, I
Not
love
as a replacement, but
Right.
as like a
Yeah,
really
man,
kinda
it's
add-on.
so much. Second best is so much better than nothing, is what we've said. But man, is there going to be a third category of people that may decide to choose this exclusively? Man, I don't know. We'll navigate some of that. I think that's going to be a very small contingent because of the way that we are set up. But man, I'm for those reasons of connectivity and evangelism, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, I'd love to talk to you guys now about, so we talked about, man, we're not going to decrease our online ministry. We actually want to continue to increase that in a big way. But obviously, we want to bring our facilities back online. Saying online is confusing because not online, but bring them back physically to meet again. Obviously, they've been an effective tool over years for Mercy Hill. And, I can just think of, times where we didn't have enough space or we needed a new building or whatever. And when we got those things, it's always been a very effective tool. But one of the things I think we've come to realize, and this really brings me to number 2 here, is, man, we've got to slowly rephase in our physical gatherings so that they can be effective tools again. And I've really thought a lot about this. Like, man, obviously there's so much going on in culture in terms of, social distancing measures being lessened and the amount of COVID cases and schools starting back eventually and all this different stuff, that one day we're going to be at the point where, yeah, people are going to want to gather again and all of that. But, man, we're just not going to be able to, like, turn the faucet back on whenever that is and all of a sudden have effective gatherings again. Because you think about all the stuff we've gone through over the years, to launch our second campus and then our third campus and our fourth campus. It's like, man, we spend a year building launch teams and building volunteer teams and determining service times and all of this stuff. And so over the coming months, like, we're going to have to do all of that over again, because, like, man, we're just not going to assume, man, we snap our fingers and our volunteer teams are exactly what they were before.
Right.
It's like, man, that's just not going to happen. So one of the things we've been thinking about in bringing our services back to gathering again is like, man, we've got to phase them in so that there can be some trial and error and figure out, like, man, what are the best practices? What our service is going to look like? What are kids ministry? What's student ministry going to look like? So all of that is just to preface why this plan is sort of built around the idea of sort of phasing parts of our gatherings back in. And man, we're really thinking about it in 3 ways. And the first way is this. We'd love to phase back in. This is kind of, I guess you could just think of it as step 1. We'd love to phase back in our Thursday night gathering. When you think about historically the way our Thursday night gathering has worked, it's at our regional campus, but it's not so much just a regional gathering. Our Thursday night gathering has been our capture service where we capture Pastor Andrew's sermon. It's been a service really where we prepare for all of our weekend services at our campuses, people that are going to be out of town, holidays. I mean, our Thursday night service really is sort of a service for the whole church. And so what we want to see happen is, these dates, we got to be sort of hold these dates with open hands. But the way we're thinking about relaunching our Thursday service is hopefully sometime at the end of June, sometime at the beginning of July to relaunch that Thursday service. And really the idea behind that is to basically say, man, like, what is it going to look like to do worship? What is it going to look like the way we're going to seat people? Like, man, what is it going to look like to enter and exit the facility? And there's just all these things that we got to figure out. Basically, man, how to sort of operate in a COVID-19 world, and so the Thursday night service is going to give us a chance to do that. So ideally what would happen is we'd have that Thursday night service for 2 to 3 weeks, and then that would sort of prepare us for the next step, which would be launching adult services across all of our campuses. But we do got to sort of ask some of those questions first of like, man, what are the best practices going to be? What is it going to look like? So that would be the goal. End of June, beginning of July, spend 2 or 3 weeks having just a Thursday night service. I mean, obviously that's just one service, so there probably is going to be sort of an RSVP component, something like that. Obviously, we'll probably make room still for people that are new or couldn't RSVP or whatever, but just to sort of give you guys a little bit of an expectation, not doing kids ministry, not doing student ministry in that first stage. What the second stage would look like, which obviously would probably happen, let's say the Thursday service was launched at the end of June. This next stage would probably come, 2-3 weeks after that. We would love to relaunch our adult services across all of our campuses. Obviously, there's a ton of questions to ask even with those. Man, are our service times going to change? Obviously, with multiple services, cleaning between services is probably going to change. There's just all these different questions we have to answer. Hopefully, having that Thursday night service will allow us some trial and error, and then, going to stage 2, allowing us to then launch adult services across all of our campuses. The idea would be that we still wouldn't have kids or student services at that point, but it'd be something we can work into in stage 3. And the way we think about stage 3 is like, man, our Thursday service is happening, our Sunday adult services are happening, and now we're thinking about bringing online our kids service and all of our student ministries. Obviously, I think that's probably, I think we just all agree, that's probably the most complex one to think about getting all the kids back together. You said it, kids don't, or probably not going to socially distance from one another. So, man, there's just, obviously, man, we're super excited about it, but there are a lot of questions to answer in terms of like, man, do our kid space have to sort of operate differently, in the way they're organized and the way we're going to space people and the way people enter and exit and just all of these different questions we're going to have to answer. But, man, we would love to see that get phased in the month of August. I do think, we're going to be probably keying off a number of different things that are going on around us, what the school systems ended up doing in our cities and counties, what's happening with COVID. Obviously those aren't the only things, but we probably will be keying off some of those things. So, that's what it's going to kind of look like, just to sort of review. Man, launch our Thursday services, launch our Sunday morning adult services, launch our kids and student ministries. Man, we would love to see that happen across 6 to 8 weeks to where, man, God willing, man, we're going into the fall and like, man, we've sort of figured out, okay, what is the new normal? We're back gathering together. And then hopefully this fall really kind of get back to the point where, man, our gatherings are back to the point where they were before, where they're a very effective tool, right, for reaching people, for doing our mission. But none of that's going to happen overnight, So let me hit one more thing before I turn it back over to Pastor Andrew. I think one of the questions that could come up is like, man, a lot of that's very subjective. Like, man, hoping for the end of June, beginning of July, man, that may last 2-3 weeks. Like, man, how are you guys going to determine, like, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3? And, man, there's some objective stuff. There's also some subjective stuff. Ultimately, it's just going to have to be sort of a wisdom decision, I think based on a number of different things. I think, like, man, obviously in every stage as a church, we're going to have those effective policies and procedures. Like our kids ministry, it's not going to change that. That's got to be like a safe environment. And so we got to have some of those procedures in place to figure out what that's going to look like. I think about like, man, you guys in the survey, the 2 things that were sort of highest on the list was like, man, we'd love to see some of the social distancing recommendations, starting to sort of head the other direction. We'd love to see some of the COVID cases start to head in the other direction. What other organizations are doing, what other businesses are doing, what the school system ends up doing. So those are all things I think are going to help us determine that we're keeping to move forward so that hopefully we're just like totally back gathering together, sometime in August. That would be the hope. So I know that's a lot, guys, but man, if you're watching this, you want to know when's Mercy Hill going to open. So that's just some general ways we're thinking about it. We'd love for you guys to reach out to us, if you got any questions. We're also going to sort of revisit this probably, 2-3 weeks from now. because we can't land. You guys, I mean, this has been our shared experience with COVID. 2 weeks is a long time. 4 weeks is a really long time. A lot can change. So probably 2 or 3 weeks from now, you guys will hear from us again in terms of like, man, okay, how's this play look now? So, man, why don't you just close this out and give us some stuff to sort of just be thinking about?
Yeah, man, just a couple minutes and we'll be done. But I just think through the fact that we have just as a society, we have enough going on right now to try and rip us apart. With the racial injustice things that we've seen, with COVID, lockdown, quarantines, people upset with each other, how they've handled that. And all. Man, reopening the buildings of a church that you love cannot be one of those things that tears us apart. So we got to just sit in that. We've got to realize that. I said this the very first time we talked about it. Man, whenever we decide to reopen the buildings, it's going to be too late for some and too early for others. We're going to do the absolute best that we can. We have effectiveness in our mind, and some of that is, based on what we kind of think people are going to do as well. I mean, it don't matter if you throw the doors open all the buildings if people ain't ready to come yet. And even if they think they're ready, if they come, but then it's like, man, it wasn't exactly the experience that I thought. A lot of churches are thinking about it more in that way of just like, man, I mean, the dude's preaching with a mask and there's 17 people in the room. I'm not sure I want to bring my friend to that, So we just got to have all that in our mind, and we're going to do the absolute best that we can. But I want to just call our church to a John 17 type of love and type of unity. Man, I know there are people that have a lot of different opinions about what is going on. There are people that have loved kind of the Zoom stuff, and there are people that, never want to see Zoom call again in their life. There are people that have been radically affected, where the discipleship in the home is spilling over to doing Bible studies at night with kids. And I mean, there are some aspects in which, to me, it is almost like the Acts type of persecution. I know we're not in persecution, but it's that way where God is shaken and people are responding, and the church is moving forward. Don't want to jump out of that too early. At the same time, I've told many people, I feel like the day that we come back in our buildings and get a chance to sing with a bunch of people, I feel like I'm just going to weep. I mean, I can't wait for that day. So there's just a lot going on, and I just want to call our church to unity. Man, it's less about when and it's more about how. And I think we have the opportunity to shock the world not by the date we pick. I think we have an opportunity to kind of shock the world by the way that we treat each other and our differences and lay down some of the things that would be our preference during this time. Man, I mean, even the families that are on our staff have different tolerances for all this stuff and are thinking about it different ways and all of that. And just the ability to be able to kind of open up in a way where people lay down their preference and they lay their life down for their brother or sister, I think is more important than any of the things in terms of like actually win. Man, we're going as hard as we can. We want to open the buildings as fast as we can, to have them still be effective. So the idea is not dragging our feet. And if you know us, you've been around Mercy Hill, I don't think you probably already know that. It's more about, man, some of these other things, we're going to get them in order. But in the midst of all that waiting, we just got to treat each other kind of a certain type of way, all right? I know people probably have questions, and if they do, they can email either one of us. Our emails are on the website. We would love to hear from you. And like Pastor Bobby said, man, we're going to be having another call like this, maybe in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Let me add just one thing to that, and then you can pray for us, Pastor Andrew. I mean, when I'm thinking about like, man, showing grace to one another, and showing grace to us as leaders, and showing grace to each other, like. One of the things that I think of, because I've just felt this over the last couple of months, like, man, we really trust you guys and your families to sort of make the decision that you need to make in terms of when you come back and what that's going to look like. Because, the last thing that we want is somebody that loves Mercy Hill and is a leader here, and, man, you may not be ready to come back at the end of June, but because you're a leader here, you're like, man, I got to come back. I'm going to do that anyway, even though it's sort of against how you feel about it. And it's like, man, we don't want to put that guilt on you. So we want to have a lot of grace of like, man, a lot of people are going to do this a lot of different ways in the coming next couple of months and figure out like, man, when is the best time for your family and what's that going to look like, and kids ministry, student ministry, and all that. So I just want to throw that out there because I know some people may be thinking about that.
I think it's great, man. That's great. Well, let's close in prayer. Father God, we thank you for the movement that you have been up to over the last couple of months. And God, we thank you for some of the things that we've seen through No More Spectators and our Sent initiative and planting the Roanoke Church plant. And God, our community groups and jumping in with all these new Zoom groups and discipleship happening. God, it's just been incredible to see you move without the buildings. Man, if there is any lesson the American church needs, it's that the church can be the church and is the church without the building. And you're just doing that right now. We thank you for that. God, with that said, we do believe the buildings are a tool and we want to use them. And God, we look forward to the day when we're in the place to be able to do that. So God, bring healing to our land and put us in the right space to do that. God, give us grace with one another as we move through this process. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Hey, thank you guys. We love being your pastors. We miss you guys. We can't wait to be together again. See you soon.
Yep.